The August Uprising was an unsuccessful insurrection against Soviet rule in the Georgian Soviet Socialist Republic from late August to early September 1924, aimed at restoring the independence of Georgia from the Soviet Union. The uprising was led by the Committee for Independence of Georgia, a bloc of anti-Soviet political organizations chaired by the Georgian Social Democratic Party. It was the culmination of a three-year struggle against the Bolshevik regime that the Soviet Russia's Red Army established during a military campaign against the Democratic Republic of Georgia in early 1921. The Red Army and Cheka troops, under orders of Joseph Stalin and Sergei Orthodox, suppressed the insurrection, and instigated a wave of mass repressions that killed several thousand Georgia citizens. The August Uprising was one of the last major rebellions against the early Soviet government, and its defeat marks the final establishment of the Soviet rule in Georgia. Background: the Red Army proclaimed Georgia a Soviet Socialist Republic on 25 February 1921, when they took control of Tiflis, the capital of Georgia, and forced the Menshevik government into exile. Loyalty of the Georgian population to the new regime did not come easily. Within the first 3 years of their rule, the Bolsheviks managed to recruit fewer than 10,000 people into their party, while the Georgian Social Democratic Party still enjoyed significant popularity in Georgia, counting over 60,000 members in their organizations. The 1918–1921 independence, though short-lived, had played a crucial role in the national awakening of Georgia, winning a popular support to the ruling Georgian Social Democratic Party. The forcible Sovietization and grievances over the ensuing border rearrangements, in which Georgia lost a sizable portion of its pre-Soviet territories to Turkey, Azerbaijan SSR, Armenian SSR and Russia, fueled a widespread opposition to the new regime. The new Bolshevik government, led by the Georgian Revcom, enjoyed so little support among the population that it faced the distinct prospect of insurrection and civil war. The Bolsheviks had limited ties with the Georgian peasantry, which was overwhelmingly opposed to collectivization and dissatisfied over land shortages and other economic troubles. The situation in the country was further aggravated by a famine prevailing in many areas and the summer 1921 outbreak of cholera, which carried off thousands of victims. The desperate shortage of food and the breakdown of medical services resulted in heavy mortality, Catholicos Patriarch Leonid being among the dead. The highly politicized working class of Georgia, with its severe economic problems, was also hostile toward the new regime, as were the national intelligentsia and nobility who had pledged their loyalty to the Democratic Republic of Georgia. A delayed transition from the Revcom's rule to the Soviet system, subordination of workers' organizations and trades unions to the Bolshevik party committees, and Moscow's centralizing policy created a discontent, even among the multi-ethnic workers of Tiflis, who were the most sympathetic towards communist doctrines. Public discontent within the Georgian society indirectly reflected in a bitter struggle among Bolsheviks about the way to achieve social and political transformation in Georgia. Hardliners led by Sergei Orthodox, head of the Transcaucasian Regional Committee of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, and Joseph Stalin, People's Commissar for Nationalities for the RSFSR and himself a Georgian, launched a series of measures aimed at elimination of the last remnants of Georgia's self-rule. They were opposed by a group of Georgian Bolsheviks, described by their opponents as national deviationists, and led by Philip Makaradze and Budu Mdevani, who advocated tolerance toward the Menshevik opposition, greater democracy within the party, a moderate approach toward land reform, and, above all, called for greater autonomy from Moscow and stubbornly opposed Stalin's project of uniting all the three Transcaucasian republics economically and politically. The crisis known as the Georgian Affair lasted throughout 1922 and ended with the hardliners' victory. As a result, Georgia merged with the Armenian and Azerbaijan republics into the Transcaucasian SFSR, a heavy blow to Georgian national pride. With the defeat of national deviationists, the Bolsheviks became more assertive, and suppressed all kinds of opposition. Between April 1922 and October 1923, parties that still retained legal status were forced to announce their dissolution and declare official loyalty to the Soviet authorities. Those who continued to operate did so as underground organizations. The Soviets also persecuted the Georgian Orthodox Church, closing or demolishing over 1,500 churches and monasteries. They imprisoned a number of clerics, including Catholicos Patriarch Ambrose, who was arrested and tried for having sent a letter of protest to the 1922 Genoa Conference, in which he described the conditions under which Georgia was living since the Red Army invasion and begged for the help of the civilized world. Preparation. In the course of the Red Army invasion, part of the defeated Georgian forces withdrew into the mountains and organized themselves into a number of small partisan groups. From 1921 to 1922, guerrilla warfare broke out in several regions of Georgia. In May 1921, the Highlanders of Svaneta, northwestern Georgia, led by Mostro Dadashkeliani, Nestor Gardapkadze and Bidzina, rose in rebellion. After a resistance of 6 months, the revolt was put down and its leaders were purged. In early 1922, the rebellion against the Soviet rule broke out in Kavshorati, another mountainous district, but in northeast Georgia. Soviet troops using aviation managed to stop this rebellion from spreading, but could not crush it completely. Colonel Kakut Sokolikashvili, who had led the revolt, managed to escape to the neighboring Chechnya, whence he made several inroads into Georgia, preventing the Bolsheviks from gaining a foothold in the eastern Georgian mountains. The local militia chief Levin Razikashvili was arrested and later shot for having sympathized with the rebellion. Still, these revolts were local and spontaneous and did not attract large masses. Within the period of 1922–1923, 33 of 57 active guerrilla detachments disintegrated or surrendered to the Soviet authorities. The deplorable situation of the anti-Soviet opposition forced all major underground parties to seek closer cooperation. The negotiations proceeded slowly, however, and it was not until mid-1922 that the Georgian Social Democratic Party reached an agreement with their former rivals, the National Democrats and some other political groups, to coordinate their efforts against the Bolsheviks. Soon the opposition parties congregated into an underground movement known as the Committee for the Independence of Georgia, or the DAMCOM. Sponsored by the government of Georgia in exile, the DAMCOM began preparations for a general uprising in Georgia. The organization set up a military center and appointed General Spiridon Chavchavadze the commander-in-chief of all rebel forces. Several members of the former Democratic Republic of Georgia government returned clandestinely from exile, including the former Minister of Agriculture, Nohom Eriki, as well as the former commander of the National Guard, Valiko Jugheli. The organizers, encouraged by the Georgian emigrants in Europe, had still more expectations that the Western powers intended to help. They also hoped that the Georgian revolt would further other Caucasian peoples to rise in arms. But the secret negotiations with Armenian and Azeri nationalists yielded no results, and even more promising talks with the Muslim Chechen leader, Ali Mitayev, were finally aborted due to mass arrests and repressions in northern Caucasus. The Georgian branch of the Soviet secret police, Cheka, with recently appointed Deputy Chief Lavrentiy Beria playing a leading role, managed to penetrate the organization and carried out mass arrests. A prominent Georgian Social Democratic Party activist, David Sajarashvili, was arrested and then deported to Germany in October 1922 along with 62 other members of Georgian Social Democratic Party. A heavy loss was sustained in February 1923 by the Georgian opposition, when 15 members of the military center were arrested. Among them were the principal leaders of the resistance movement, Generals Kotab Kazi, Alexander Andronikashvili and Vardan Sulukidze. They were executed on 19 May 1923. In March 1923, the Cheka discovered an underground Menshevik print shop and arrested several oppositionists. The Georgian Social Democratic Party leaders Nohomeriki, Beniashkvishvili, and Valiko Jugheli too fell in the hands of the Cheka on 9 November 1923, 25 July 1924, and 6 August 1924, respectively. Under these circumstances, some Georgians doubted whether the uprising could be successful. The captured rebel leader, Jugheli, urged Cheka officials to allow him to inform his comrades that their plans had been discovered and advised them to abandon the proposed revolt. But the Cheka refused. Jugheli's message still reached the rebels, but the conspirators decided that this might have been a Cheka provocation and went ahead with plans for the uprising. There are many indications that the Soviet intelligence had been, at a certain level, implicated in provoking the uprising. The Cheka, employing secret agents in local socialist circles, were well informed of the conspiracy and popular dissatisfaction of the Bolshevik rule. Instructed by Stalin and Orjonikidze, Beria and his superior, Kvantiliani, actually encouraged the rebellion so they would have a pretext for eliminating all political opposition and avenging personal scores with their former rivals in Georgia. Outbreak and reaction. On 18 August 1924, the Damkom laid plans for a general insurrection for 2 a.m. 29 August. The plan of the simultaneous uprising miscarried, however, and, through some misunderstanding, the mining town of Kiachura, western Georgia, rose in rebellion a day earlier, on 28 August. This enabled the Soviet government to timely put all available forces in the region on alert. Yet, at first the insurgents achieved considerable success and formed an interim government of Georgia chaired by Prince Georgi Sateli. The uprising quickly spread to neighboring areas and a large portion of western Georgia and several districts in eastern Georgia wrested out of the Soviet control. The success of the uprising was short-lived, however. Although the insurrection went further than the Cheka had anticipated, the reaction of the Soviet authorities was prompt. Stalin dissipated any doubt in Moscow of the significance of the disorders in Georgia by the one word, Kronstadt, referring to the Kronstadt Rebellion, a large-scale though unsuccessful mutiny by Soviet sailors in 1921. Additional Red Army troops under the overall commander Semen Pugachev were promptly sent in and Georgia's coastline was blockaded to prevent a landing of Georgian émigré groups. Detachments of the Red Army and Cheka attacked the first insurgent towns in western Georgia, Kiachura, Senarki and Abasha, as early as 29 August and managed to force the rebels into forests and mountains by 30 August. The Red Army forces employed artillery and aviation to fight the guerrillas who still continued to offer resistance, especially in the province of Guria, a home region to many Georgian Social Democratic Party leaders and thus overwhelmingly disloyal to the Bolshevik rule. Tiflis, Batumi and some larger towns, where the Bolsheviks enjoyed more authority, remained quiet, as did Abkhazia and most of the territories compactly settled by ethnic minorities. Following the setbacks suffered by the insurgents in the west, the epicenter of the revolt shifted into eastern Georgia, where, on 29 August, a large rebel force under Colonel Kolakashvili assaulted the Red Army barracks in Manglishi, on southwestern approaches of Tiflis. but was driven back by Soviet troops, who had heavily fortified all strategic positions in and around the capital. Reinforcements failed and Kolakashvili's forces were left isolated, forcing them to retreat eastward into the Kakheti province. On the 3rd of September, Kolakashvili made the last desperate attempt to turn the tide of the rebellion and took the town of Dusheta in a surprise attack. However, he could not hold off a Red Army counter-offensive and withdrew into mountains. The suppression of the rebellion was accompanied by a full-scale outbreak of the Red Terror, unprecedented even in the most tragic moments of the revolution, as the French author Boris Souvarine puts it. The scattered guerrilla resistance continued for several weeks, but by mid-September most of the main rebel groups had been destroyed. On the 4th of September, the Cheka discovered the rebels' chief headquarters at the Shiomgvime monastery near the town of Mtsk-Heta, and arrested Prince Andronikashvili, the Damcom chairman, and his associates Javakishvili, Ishnali, Jinoria, and Bokarishvili. On the same day, Beria met with the arrested oppositionists in Tiflis, and proposed to issue a declaration urging the partisans to put down their arms. The committee members, tied up and facing death themselves, accepted the proposal on the condition that in order to stop mass executions be given immediately. Beria agreed and the rebels signed the declaration in order to put an end to the bloodshed. The persecutions did not end, however. In violation of the promise made by Beria to the arrested opposition leaders, mass arrests and executions continued. The political guidance of the anti-revolt operations was affected by the GPU chief in Georgia, Solomon Mogilevsky, and the repressions were largely supported by the Transcaucasian Central Committee. Stalin himself is quoted to have vowed that all of Georgia must be plowed under. In a series of raids, the Red Army and Cheka detachments killed thousands of civilians, exterminating entire families including women and children. Mass executions took place in prisons, where people were killed without trial, including even those in prison at the time of the rebellion. Hundreds of arrested were shot directly in railway trunks, so that the dead bodies could be removed faster, a new and effective technical invention by the Cheka officer, Talakadze. The exact number of casualties and the victims of the purges remains unknown. Approximately 3,000 died in fighting. The number of those who were executed during the uprising or in its immediate aftermath amounted to 7,000–10,000 or even more. According to the most recent accounts included also in the Black Book of Communism, 12,578 people were put to death from the 29th of August to the 5th of September 1924. About 20,000 people were deported to Siberia and Central Asian deserts.